Hello everyone, it is Evan from the Trade Risk on Sunday, June 21st, here with a market recap video. We're going to spend some time initially looking at the current state of the market. We're going to then get into some other indices, leading sectors, and then some trade ideas coming into next week. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you everyone for some of the feedback I've been getting on these videos. It's been really helpful, and again, my goal is just to provide value to as many people as possible. So if you're not subscribed to the Trade Risk YouTube channel or the newsletter, thetraderisk.com/join, please do. They're both free. They're resources for trade ideas, for market analysis, so on and so forth. So if you aren't connected, you like the videos, please do subscribe. And again, if you have any comments, feedback, different things you'd want to see or suggestions, please let me know. With that aside, let's jump into the markets here. We got a lot to cover, so I'm going to try and talk quick, but still try and get through everything I want to get through. So we'll start with the SPY ETF, and the first thing I'll note is we had the ex-dividend on Friday for the SPY ETF. So the close here on this candle looks a little more pessimistic than it otherwise should. I believe the ex-dividend was for $1.03, so technically our close on Friday should have been right around here at 211.84. And if we look at the cash market, you can see this is really what the action looked like for Friday. So definitely not a very bullish day, but not quite as bad as what the SPY ETF is painting for us. So I think from a technical picture here, we had a really nice run on Thursday, right? We had FOMC out on Wednesday, indecisive candle. Thursday, we got a really nice strong move to the upside. And Friday, we had that sort of momentum on the bull side where we could have really made a run and push breakout highs here on the SPY on the S&P 500, but we didn't quite get that. We got the opposite where we closed on the lows. We gave about half of that back, a little more than half of the action back from Thursday, and we are now back in this range. So 2120, this is for the cash market, 2175 on the downside, still the big levels that we're watching. Now, Friday was also quad witching, so a lot of options activity there that could have played an influence here on how the market closed. That we'll have to see what how we progress in the week coming to see if we if we continue to follow through on Friday's down close, or if we just take everything looking at a weekly chart and say, hey, we closed up 76 basis points in the spot in the S&P 500. Perhaps the bulls can add to this from a longer term time frame and break us out above this 2120. So a few things to note as we start to talk about that. Let's first look at some of the internals here that I like to look at. The first is the advanced decline line, and then we will look at the McClellan oscillator. So the interesting thing to note with the advanced decline line, let's go back to a daily chart. You can see here that on Thursday's session, which is this point right here where this cursor is, this was almost all-time highs in the S&P 500. It was less than $1 away, so about 0.5% away. But notice how far below we are the all-time highs here in the advanced decline line. So there is still disagreement between the amount of underlying participation in the market versus price action. So price action is bullish here. It's trying to break out, and there's a lot of sectors that are breaking out, and the participation under the underlying strength in this market is diminishing just a little bit. So there's a divergence here. If you look at the McClellan oscillator, you can see we poked our head out above the zero line on Thursday, and then we ended up giving some of that back on Friday's session. We're still above the zero line, which is traditionally an inflow of money. It's a bullish sign, and so on and so forth. But again, look at how much we've spent basically the past 3 months or so underneath the zero line. So that is traditionally bearish behavior, in a general sense. Now, it's not the end-all be-all. Again, I think price trumps everything, but these are things you want to be aware of now. This divergence on some of these internal indicators are now persisting, and they've been around now for a few months. Definitely since April or at least May or so, we've seen this. So something to keep in mind. Again, I think price rules above this, but you want to be aware of what some of those internal readings are saying. So if you look at the IWM, for example, absolutely monsterly bullish behavior here. All-time highs, closing very convincingly above. Friday we gave basically nothing back, a nice digestion day. So super, super bullish, super healthy here. The Qs, this one actually was the most hit on Friday, giving 0.7% back and closing, firmly just kind of dead center in this range, so to speak. Still longer term uptrend, still needs to get it back above 111 to break out to fresh momentum highs. So that's where we are. There's a lot of cross currents. The IWM certainly where the most strength is, and arguably the SPY is still the weakling here. And that's because of some weighing in some of the sectors that we're going to get into shortly. So let's look at some of those sectors. IBB, let's talk about the bulls first. The strong sectors is the biotech index, right? This had the monster run on Thursday, monster breakout above this tight range. We were watching this step by step, waiting for a resolve. We did get the resolve to the upside. Very bullish behavior. You also have the healthcare sector, XLV. We're at highs here. Even XLY, the consumer discretionaries, we're at highs here. So those are definitely the strengths. What's weighing on the SPY in particular is like energy. This has now slid back down into some of the lows that we saw earlier in the year, and you can see we're just carving out a longer term, potentially bottoming pattern, and this could take some time. So we don't know, maybe 73, we need to come retest the lower end of this range. Maybe the bulls will step in and put in a higher low here. That's yet to be seen, but energy has been weighing a little bit. The rate sensitive sectors like the utilities has been weighing on the SPY in particular. The home builders aren't that great. The industrials, a little bit sluggish too. So you really have some split markets where you got 3 or 4 sectors at all-time highs breaking out. You got three or four that are just hanging, in sloppy ranges, or breaking down a little bit. So that's what you see from a sector by sector basis. You got some price breakouts. The internals, you see the divergences there. So it's still a very tricky market. I think there's certainly a lot of constructive action though this week. Again, I think the IWM, the small cap this week in particular, very bullish. The IBB, very bullish. So take that as, there's opportunity on both sides, I feel like, but that's sort of where we are in this market. Now, if we look at some other indices, some other markets, TLT for example, really nice session on Friday. This is now coming back into this 120 to 118 slot we've been talking about for a while. Intermediate downtrend is down, and short term we're trying to bounce here. So see if that bounce can continue. UNG, this one's still hanging out in this bottoming sideways pattern there. Not too much to say about it. USO starting to get, it's getting interesting here. Again, we had this nice run from the March lows all the way up to $21, and now we're going sideways, holding pretty pent up here relative to this last impulse leg to the upside. So very interested in this. Want to see which way it resolves above $21. Would get me pretty interested in potentially taking a long trade in oil. Gold and silver had a nice run Thursday, Friday, nice gap up on the metals on Thursday, held it up pretty much on Friday, but still in some longer term bottoming patterns in my opinion, or potentially continuation patterns to the downside. We'll have to see how those resolve themselves. Now let's look at some individual names. We're going to start with Apple here, and Apple is a name I actually got short on Friday, and for a few reasons really. The first, had a pretty poor session relative to the indices, down 1%, and we did break below the past 3 days lows, and this is basically the lowest close we've had since this candle right here on May 13th. So this is a new monthly low, effectively, closing low that is, and this pattern here is potentially close to breaking here, this trend line. I don't really like to use trend lines too often. If I do, they need to have a lot of touches. They need to be a very defined trend line. And in this case, I think we have that in Apple, where we've tested this rising trend line many times now. And I think the more you test it, the more likely a trend line will fail to hold on the next retest. So I'm looking for a quick move to the downside. I think the risk reward sets up really nicely here. We could have a quick flush if this does decide to break down. Otherwise, my risk, above one, I'm not looking to hang on to this. It needs to work or it doesn't. Above 128, it's effectively the most I would decide to give this short. So we'll see how this acts going into next week. I am net long this market. Apple is actually the only short I have on right now. So that is that on Apple. Google, completely other side of things. This is looking really good here above this 556.50. We got to close right on it. I think if you do see some continuation to the upside, this one could start to move here on this. I don't know. It's sort of a volume null in here to the potentially back up to this 580 level. Price tends to move pretty quickly in this area, so I would look for some some follow through on Google to the upside there. Next is Netflix. Poor session on Friday, still though down 1%, but still above the closing right on the fast 8 EMA. So very strong still, momentum still being kept up in this name. Let's see if perhaps we can get some more follow through to the downside, get some corrective action to potentially get us back involved in this trade on the long side. But for now, Netflix still hanging tough, not really seeing too much as far as actionable trade opportunities there. Amazon, I got long this on Thursday. I stopped out of this yesterday on Friday. I just didn't like the reversal action that I saw here. I want to keep momentum as strong as possible. Down 1% is not something I want to hold right now. I will look to revisit this, but still holding, relatively up here in this high level consolidation. But you really want to see it now get back above 440 or so. And not close on the lows, and see if we can get something going there. But it is above all the fast moving averages, so depending on how tight you like your stops, mine are pretty tight, so this one didn't work for me. But if you're in this, by all means, you could still be having a stop down here. If you're a longer term holder, I think Amazon is still very much in play to the upside. Facebook, a little bit of a cooling off a little bit on Friday, still looking like it's trying to get going, holding above $81. It's got 84 above it, so still kind of hanging out, not all that interesting to me right there. Twitter, this one is trying to make a comeback here. Got a nice little oversold kind of pop here into, actually tested all the way down to 33 and change before we had this candle, this reversal candle here on Tuesday, I believe. Yep. Wednesday, Thursday was sideways, and then we found some upside action on Friday. So nice outperformer on Friday relative to a lot of the other names. Fast moving averages still sloping down. Let's see Twitter if it can really make a stand coming into next week. It needs to get back above 36 and then start to turn these moving averages in the other direction to get things going. So we'll have to see how that one shapes out next week. Alibaba, nothing really changed here. Looks like it wants to try and fill this gap here from last earnings. Still kind of sloppy where it is, so kind of an avoid for me. GoPro, showing signs like it might want to just come back down here and move sideways a little bit. It's had a nice run since March. See if it can move sideways here, develop a little base at near these highs, and maybe we'll get a trade above $60 in the near future. But this just looks like it needs more time before I would be interested in getting involved in it. So let's look at some other names. Actually, let's look at Tesla real quick. Really nice session for Tesla, in particular on Wednesday. This candle right here had a really nice session, and looking good, hanging high and tight between Thursday and Friday. Again, this one's been tough to get a hold of if you haven't already been involved in it. Weekly chart, you can see we're very quickly getting close to the all-time highs here. Still have a ways to go, but it's done a lot of work here, and this level 260 or so has played a a level of significance in the past. So let's see if it can continue. Tesla again has been hard to get aboard of, but it's been looking good as of recently. So let's look at some other names now. ECL. These are some trade ideas for next week. ECL on a weekly chart, I think you can see what I'm looking at. Had a nice breakout. Still got faded a little bit, but it did manage to make a new closing weekly high here, going all the way back to this candle here. So not quite all-time highs, but looking good. Let's see if we get some continuation. A little bit of a reversal, topping tail here, but you know, let's see how next week looks in this name. That one could get going. Zen, ZEN. This one not quite ready yet on a weekly chart. I think you can see it is a fairly recent IPO, had an impulse leg to the upside. Now we're moving sideways here, so $24 looks like it's trying to take that out, and then you'll have 26 will be a big level on the upside. But keep this one on your radar. It's starting to shape up a little bit here. Could move really quick when it decides to go, if it decides to go. So something that you might want to have on your radar in the future. SYF. This one again, not quite ready just yet, but you know, you sort of have this this nice pattern at play. 33.20 or so seems to be a resistance level that has been giving this one some trouble. It's a recent IPO. Keep this one on watch for a close above 33.20. I think that one might set it in motion. And then JAH, I'm sorry. Above $54 again on a weekly chart. I think it smooths this action out. You can see it's had a really nice run since last October 2014. Now it's been spending the better part of 5 or 6 months now, hanging pretty high and tight. Moving averages are catching up. Let's see if this one can get going. Above 54 or so looks pretty good. And finally, by request, a few names here. UTHR. This one in the biotech space, which is a good sector to be in right now, is showing a lot of strength. It's trying to get going here. Not quite an all-time high, but very close. If we look on a weekly chart, you can see it's had a great run for the past few years now, and you can see, I mean, weekly chart, strong uptrend. We're trying to make a new closing high here. It's not a picture perfect setup that I like to look for. I just like to see a little more filling in on my base, you know, on a sideways base. The way we kind of came up here, I'd love to see this just move sideways a little bit more and develop. Otherwise, though, I think if you make a new all-time high, new closing high, I mean, it's tough to fight that. So I certainly wouldn't want to be short it. If anything, you know, above the highs from Friday's session, they look pretty good. And then finally, HSIC, this is another one I talked about. This one looks great, weekly chart. This was a breakout this week. You could have definitely taken this on a weekly time frame, high and tight for quite some time. This one looks great. Looks like it wants to keep running. Again, healthcare sector, it's been hot. So this is something that would be very interesting to have a play on. So that is all I have for today. Thanks for watching, and again, if you have any comments, suggestions, feedback, please do let me know, and until then, I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.